Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Ben Kay, and as the founder and a director of Automic Group, welcome to today's webinar. By way of introduction, Automic Group is the leading business specialist to listed and unlisted entities in Australia. We have offices in both Perth and Sydney, and we're the only company in Australia that offers integrated technology solutions combined with legal, share registry, company secretarial, governance, and finance services. Automic currently services over 600 ASX listed entities and in excess of 200 unlisted companies, funds, trusts, and not-for-profits. We are the fastest growing company of its kind. Today, you'll be hearing from 4 of the companies we work closely with: hipages, FamilyZone, InteliCare, and Dubber. As we all know, COVID-19 has presented a number of challenges for Australian businesses. However, for technology companies like ours and those you'll hear from today, it has also presented a number of opportunities, both immediate and in the future. At Automic Group, we were able to act very quickly to transition our entire team of nearly 100 staff to work remotely within a matter of just days. Our technology enabled our team to have full and uninterrupted access to all information they required to effectively continue to service our clients, ranging from taking calls to full user access to our real-time registry system. We experienced no disruption whatsoever across the period where our staff were working remotely. Today, you'll hear how hipages, FamilyZone, InteliCare, and Dubber managed to rise to the occasion during these unprecedented times and use technology to their advantage. I'd now like to hand over to Jason Waller, CEO of InteliCare.
Thanks, Ben. InteliCare is a technology company, so in terms of our transition to COVID-19, it was reasonably smooth. But what I'd maybe like to touch on today is how we saw our customers transition and adopt new technology. Just by way of a bit of background, InteliCare provides an aged care system that allows people to live independently in their own home. We do this by installing a range of smart sensors connected to an IoT platform in the cloud. We then use AI to learn what's normal behaviour in that home, such as preparing meals, going on outings and bathroom visits and mobility around the home. And then we send messages and alerts out to family and caregivers when something's out of the ordinary. And by doing that, we allow them to detect early incidents, to get in the way and intervene before that occurs, and therefore allow people to live independently, whether they are ageing at home or they have a disability. Next slide, please. So in terms of COVID-19, this allows for potentially a no-touch healthcare system, while recognising the fact that obviously human intervention is important. When coupled with telehealth, we have the ability for a GP to have a consultation online with their clients and patients or a caregiver, and then adopt a care plan or pharmaceuticals through e-pharmacy and monitor that person using the InteliCare dashboard. And by doing this, we allow them to reduce the transmission pathways that are otherwise present when caregivers go from home to home, delivering home care to those services, or the elderly or people with disability have to visit their GP. Next slide. Interestingly, however, while the government created new legislation to allow the rapid adoption of telehealth, there's still a debate in terms of how well this is proceeding. So, for example, we saw at one end of the spectrum, lobby groups asking governments to restrict the use of telehealth so that we didn't have large GP clinics coming up online and providing services interstate. But at the same time, we saw that limiting for some care groups their ability to access the right level of service. So in terms of technology adoption, just even at the front end in terms of telehealth, there is still a lot to be solved for as we seek to find the final solution with regard to the best way to implement this, and particularly in an industry where we're looking after the very vulnerable. Next slide. So what we've observed is a couple of things. On the left, we have about 4 million people who are in the aged care market, and about 1.3 million of those receive government funds. But there are nearly 3 million who don't. And that's the emerging market. And we see these markets largely behaving in the same way. But we see the emerging market, that is those who don't receive government funding, be more progressive and faster to adopt technology because they take a DIY approach. That is, our product would generally be bought by their family out of their own pocket rather than going through a care provider. It generally follows the normal technology adoption curve. So we see innovators and laggards. We see both elderly people who think it's big brother and don't want to have that kind of oversight in their house, although we're generally able to overcome that kind of impediment to adoption by talking about its benefits as a guardian angel and also the fact that they end up in residential aged care. They're going to have big brother and all his sisters there as well. On the left of the spectrum, we also see elderly and their family who actively seek out this kind of technology and want it in their home and feel vulnerable otherwise. So there was no clear winner, but I would suggest that in the general sense, we saw more people in the early adopter and early majority market than we saw in the late majority and laggards. But what's critical, next slide please, is that we address these concerns in a very methodical way. So I'd just like to call out some of the key success criteria that we observed in terms of managing technology adoption in a vulnerable market when we're talking about people who are elderly and otherwise not particularly au fait or used to technology, but getting them to understand that telehealth and technology in the healthcare sector is more than just iPads and FaceTime and Zoom calls. What was critical is that you have all members of the team involved. We needed to talk to both the case managers, the OT workers and the healthcare providers as much as we spoke with the family and the individual themselves. It was very, very important, that fourth point, that the organisation has an early adopter culture. So we were quick to find that those organisations that were still trying to come to grips with technology, that they really failed to cross the Rubicon in the early stages. And so we concentrated our efforts on those organisations that had that strategy already sort of up and running and in place. And we would look for those organisations that had a head of strategy or a head of innovation and target those. Once it was adopted, the interesting force that we saw was that the impediments that were described in the early slide fell away very, very quickly. So my general observation is that the elderly and the aged care sector are just as capable of adopting technology as maybe their younger compatriots. Next slide. So if you want to find out more about InteliCare, you can visit our website. I think we're at the forefront of these kinds of solutions. We see very large macro forces with the growing age population and the move away from residential aged care as a forcing factor in adoption of this technology. And COVID-19 has accelerated that. But it's still important to address those impediments and those concerns of the late majority and laggards who are not used to adopting this kind of technology. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Jason. Just a reminder to everyone that you can ask questions via the tab on your screen, so please do so. We can either address those post each presentation or in the panel session that will run at the end. Jason, I found yours a particularly interesting story, particularly in partnering with you from the registry perspective, as I believe it was the first IPO to get up and going and ultimately list post that initial COVID phase. So yeah, very well done to you and the team.
Thank you, and thanks for the support of Automic, Ben.
I'd like to hand over to Robbie Sharon-Zipser, CEO of hipages.
Hi everyone. I am going to go through a few slides with you and tell you a little bit about hipages and how hipages kept our customers as a platform marketplace engaged with its customers, talking specifically about tradies who are our main customer and the users of our platform, the consumers. And I'll give you a bit of an idea of how we kept our team productive and engaged during what is probably one of the most difficult periods in the history of business, at least for the last 100 years. And how technology enabled progress for hipages through uncertain times. So let me tell you a little bit about hipages. If we could just go to the next slide, please. So hipages is an online platform that connects Australians with trusted tradies to simplify home improvement. We started in a true technology story in the back of a garage in Sydney. commenced as a directory service for trades, and then grew the business to a team of close to 200 people, mostly in Sydney, Manila, and in China. And we primarily connect homeowners now with tradies, creating happier homes through effortless home improvement. Next slide, please. The way we work is we have users that post a job in a platform. They select their preferred trade, provide a bit of a description, the timing of when they'd like work done, add some images of the work that they'd like to have completed in their home. We would then connect those users with tradies. They can then compare the profiles and the quotes provided by the tradies, and then hire the right tradie. On the other side of the platform with tradies, they can create a unique business profile, connect with homeowners, stay in control, picking the work in the right areas for their businesses, and control as in terms of purchasing the product through a subscription model. And traders can get paid fast through the platform. Next slide, please. Just to give everyone a bit of a flavour of the size of the hipages business, we have over 3.5 million users of the site, 36,000 paying tradies, making us the largest network of trades in Australia. And we process close to over 100,000 job requests for tradies every single month. Next slide, please. So what did we do in keeping our tradies engaged in the platform during what I said earlier is one of the most challenging and difficult periods in the history of business and in the world? So many of the tradies in the hipages platform are sole traders and have apprentices. So they were hit hard economically by the pandemic when I vividly remember the date on the 17th of March when all the shockwaves came through. Actually, I think it was the day Tom Hanks announced that he had COVID-19 up in the Gold Coast. So what did we do for our customers? So we offered financial relief to the tradies, introducing a new product feature, allowing our tradies to pause their accounts for up to 30 days. There was so much information as well out in the news. We decided to take the lead and share clear, neutral guidelines specific to the trade industry. We built a dedicated COVID-19 hub with a content hub essentially, where we were updating tradies with news and announcements as they were being made by the federal and state governments. And we were also consistently providing guidance to our tradies. Even today in Victoria, we're giving them guidance on what are the regulations in terms of what is allowed and what is deemed as an essential service. And we created bespoke content to help tradies navigate the changing environment, such as how to get help receiving financial relief. And most importantly, we lobbied government to support our tradies in getting them deemed as an essential service. So the Australian trade industry is a significant economic driver, with the residential sector alone contributing about 6% of Australian GDP. So it was really important that we actually were able to allow trades to work safely in a pandemic and be treated as an essential service. And for the most part, we were very successful. Obviously, with lockdowns impacting Melbourne at level 4 restrictions, that's more restrictive, and only really true essential services such as plumbing and electrical work that are an emergency are going to be treated as an essential service now. However, for level 3 restrictions, all services were effectively deemed as an essential service, and effectively we're providing jobs and keeping the economy going, considering the GDP proportion that the industry represents. Next slide, please. So our technology also was an enabler for homeowners to continue to engage with tradies, to operate and encourage users to post work, because we were educating our users and our tradies to work in a contactless way during the pandemic, and it led people to continue to be productive with their time at home, resulting in some of the job spikes we saw in the platform literally right after the pandemic and the lockdown and restrictions were implemented. So we again created a dedicated content hub for consumers that was tailored to explain to consumers how they could work and interact with trades. We also created a social share feature, and the share feature was saying, I'm supporting our tradies who continue to safely provide essential services for millions of Australians during the coronavirus pandemic. Hashtag tradies are essential. Our data had shown surges in specific trade categories. Throughout the past 5 months, we've been continuing to adapt and focus our efforts and marketing to ensure that we were getting the work to the right customers and our right tradies in the right times. So we were by providing advice on the jobs, encourage people to post jobs, and also avoid people putting themselves in danger from doing DIY activity where actually a trade should be doing it. So there was some news that people were doing DIY things, especially around electrical and plumbing work, which is extremely dangerous and life-threatening. We were encouraging people to post work and have trades come into their homes safely to do the work. So in terms of the golden triage, in terms of how we look at our business in the two customer sets, users and tradies, we also look at our people as a critical part of that whole network. And when we look at our business, we did a lot of things to ensure that our people were safe and productive. So we have a demographic of 120 employees in Sydney, 60 people in our team in Manila, and 10 people in our offshore engineering hub in China. So in the height of the pandemic, there was urgent action required to get everyone working from home. We weren't necessarily fully enabled with laptops and equipment, so we had to think really quickly, and within 3 days, we had a pilot running, and in 5 days, full implementation for everyone working from home in a relatively inexpensive way. So we actually didn't buy laptops for everyone. We bought boxes and got team members to take their equipment home in bubble wrap cardboard boxes. We bought from Officeworks close to 70, 80 monitors. They took that home with them with additional keyboards and instructions how to connect their equipment. We upgraded our VPNs and bought dongles to allow our team members to stay connected where they may have had weaker internet signals. Overall, very impressive, and that process went quite seamlessly. Unfortunately, the restrictions in Manila were implemented very quickly, and we were not able to get our team in Manila operational. So we lost about 50% of our capacity in Manila overnight, and that resulted us to think very quickly on the ground. And we automated many of the functions that we were originally planning to do over a phased period and accelerated that over a 4-week period. And we're able to successfully implement significant amounts of automation. And unfortunately, we had to not continue to require the services of half the team in Manila, but introduced a lot more efficiencies in the business and obviously allowed us to continue and service our customers in a productive and healthy way. So in terms of downsizing, obviously that was difficult. So what we encourage and I would recommend is to communicate and be transparent. And also make sure that you acknowledge the sacrifices of your team, of the team members. And I regularly did that in weekly catch-ups with the team. The team made actually significant sacrifice in agreeing, the entire team agreed to take a 20% pay reduction during the period of uncertainty. And we rewarded that team back by issuing them and completing their ESOPs, even though they would not have actually technically achieved those ESOPs at the end of the financial year. So as a thank you for the cash hit, we rewarded the team with equity in the hipages business. So again, it was all about the communication and acknowledgement of the sacrifices and the thanks to the team. And we came together very strongly and in a healthy way to support our customers and actually have now overachieved to our budgeted numbers prior to COVID-19. Obviously, I probably won't dwell on it because we're all familiar with it, but we obviously use the G Suite products and the Zoom products extensively, and it was a much faster adoption than what we would have historically seen. Those tools are very powerful. I can't speak highly enough of Zoom and how much it helped us stay connected. We also encouraged post the pandemic or the height of the pandemic, because we're based in Sydney, to have people return back to the office in a safe and healthy way, and obviously made our office COVID safe, and that's been acknowledged and recognised by the Department of Health in New South Wales. We obviously had to change the logistics in the office setup. We're at about 40 to 50% capacity now, and we probably will phase that in depending on macro conditions over the rest of the year to get the office back and running to normal. In terms of the next slide, just to give everyone a bit of a flavour, you can see the big crunch coming in March, and then obviously post-March, we saw a big spike and actually returning to year-over-year growth in the business. The slight downturn that you're seeing in June is just really some of the macro conditions that we were seeing in Melbourne and Sydney impacting our job numbers that are entering in the platform. However, they're sort of holding at those levels now, which is still year-on-year growth. And obviously, we're very pleased with the results and the transition and the changes that have been occurring. We're very happy with everything at the minute. Next slide. Thank you. That's it.
Thanks for that update, Roby. Yeah, obviously sounds like you've built a fair bit of, or will build a fair bit of goodwill, and have already with your client base based on sort of switching into that information sharing phase as well, which which people relied on a lot during that period. So, and obviously driving some efficiencies internally, which will bode well for the future. So, so good luck. No questions for you at this stage. We'll now hand over to Tim Levy, Managing Director of FamilyZone.
Okay, hang on. Thanks, Ben. Hopefully everyone can see me. Yeah, so I'll provide a bit of background about FamilyZone first, and then talk a bit about the impacts of coronavirus. And I noticed there's a number of names on the participant board here, so apologies to you. You've heard this story many times, but I will give a bit of background and then I'll talk about coronavirus. So FamilyZone is a cyber safety business, which is different to cyber security. So our job is to protect kids as opposed to security businesses, which are really about protecting information and corporate assets. As at the end of July, we had 1.5 million students on our platform. I think we've got close to 100,000 parents on paid for subscriptions across our Western markets, and over 2,800 schools using our services across Australia, New Zealand, the US, and the UK. UK is a very small little operation. We have one reseller there, no bodies, no boots on the ground. The main part of our sales force is now in the US, which accounts for 25% of our employees, and growing. Our job, as I said, is about cyber safety, protecting kids. And if you just move to the next slide, I'll explain how that works. Next slide. So we have a range of technologies that schools can implement inside the schools network, on the students' devices, and parents can use that same technology at home on the kid's student device or on the kid's personal mobile phone and in-home routers. Essentially, it's a single platform that allows schools and parents to share, collaborate in their duty, legal duty for schools, and a duty as a parent to keep kids safe in school and when outside. And as you can imagine, that's a super relevant objective given the times of coronavirus, with literally millions and millions of kids across the globe being sent home with devices to unprepared parents. And schools' legal obligation to keep kids safe didn't end just because the kids were sent home. Those legal obligations continued, as well as all the logistical challenges of issuing instructions to kids and marking and taking school rolls and so on. So it's huge logistical challenges for these schools. And parents were overwhelmed, and parents and everyone would have heard stories of Zoom bombing and all these sorts of issues that transferred from these secure network environments at schools were transferred to these home situations. Again, our technology is perfectly suited to that time. Now, how we and I might say in terms of the cultural aspects, as was just mentioned, coronavirus was very galvanizing for our business. It was scary in February when all started to hit. We were actually simultaneously starting to talk to investors about a capital raising, which made it a nervous time for everybody. But as the impacts of coronavirus became clear within our business, our team united like I've never seen before, and we popped out through this process a far stronger and more cohesive group of people. If you can move to the next slides. Next one. So what happened in early March? The US schools in US, which is I'll spend most of my time today talking about the US. In early March, the first school shut down, and by the end of March, pretty much every school across the US had shut down. You're talking about 100,000 schools, 57 million students were sent home. We were looking at it just spinning on these websites, just showing how many students were being sent home. And what we did, because we knew that our technology was relevant to this issue, we hastily constructed an offer where our remote learning tools, so the tools that a school can install on a student's device and allows the teacher to have visibility. Think about like a virtual classroom where the teacher can see what's on that kid's screen, they can open up the internet, they can open up tabs. We made that service available for free to our school clients anywhere. And we had a pretty good take up. We had a massive diocese, Catholic diocese here in the East Coast, take on the product and we helped them roll out technology to something like 25,000 devices in an afternoon, allowed them to deliver duty of care and support parents with all these devices being sent home. We had a number of New Zealand schools, many every day, signing up to that sort of service. I think all up we had about 100 schools take on this offer of free classroom duty of care type tools through to the end of June. But what was really interesting was a couple of things. In Australia, the public school sector was quite paralysed by the technical implications of this. They really didn't have the tools to push technology onto student devices and keep kids safe. So the public school system in Australia, by and large, was completely unprepared for this, and we're using paper-based remote learning arrangements. In the US, very different. The US, by and large, is school-funded devices. Schools have enterprise technologies called device management, which allows them to deploy technology instantly and keep those kids safe when they're at home, and to deliver remote instruction. And what we were thinking was going to be a big take up in this free offer was really ignored by school districts in the US who just started buying services off us. If you go to the next page, I'll talk a bit more about that. So what we found is in early March, as the first cases started to emerge, we started to get calls from schools in the US. This is website traffic from our US site, and they were chasing deals. Like, we're shutting down the schools, we're sending kids home, we've just bought 20,000 Chromebooks, we need them to be safe tomorrow. So bluebird deals were coming out of nowhere. And then things started to slow down as everyone was in a mad panic, as literally 100,000 schools shut down in about 21 days. And then once through the end of March, the schools started to plan for dealing with this. And as I mentioned, bluebird deals that came out of nowhere, tens of thousands of devices needed to be protected overnight. Of course, we did have some deals that were in train that got pushed out. Some clients or potential clients who said, well, we might just stick with our existing vendor. But those school districts that were sending home devices for the first time, they had to do something. And this is a really important point about our industry, is schools have a legal obligation to keep kids safe. Some schools exercise that duty, deliver that by having network-based technology, and they keep all the devices at home. But if you're a school that's sending devices home in the States, you have to have technology like FamilyZone on those devices. So all these schools had to do this. They had to get devices in the hands of kids and had to send them home. And so for us and every participant in our industry, calls went through the roof. And then at the same time, fortunate for us, the US government introduced the CARES Act and injected $12.5 billion into supporting online learning. Essentially, what the government in the US is doing is enabling school districts down to really early years in primary schools to issue devices to kids. And those devices will be going home. And so now built into the system in the US is an expectation that kids get learning devices, those devices will go home, and those devices will be safe. So that's really, in a sense, doubled our addressable market in the States, in a market that we've already been competing really, really well on. And importantly, when you think about the longer term implications here, once you give a 5-year-old or year 5 a Chromebook in US education, the next cohort of year 5s need to get one too. So this isn't just a sugar hit. This is like a long-lasting change in the opportunity set for our business in the States. Just go to the next slide. I'll talk about the implications of it. And so what we found is, our business was doing really well. We doubled our recurring revenue, certainly the number of students that we had inside 6 months to 30 June. And then in the month of July, we added more student licenses than we did in the whole quarter to the end of June. So it just goes to show, and that's kind of outside of typical sales cycles. So what we've seen is not only FamilyZone's very relevant product set, resonating in that market, but we've found that is continuing in outside of typical sales cycles as well, which is, again, a testament to our product set, how well we're marketing, but also the fact that coronavirus has meant that school districts throughout the US are now having to rethink their architectures. They need to now support one-to-one devices, and those devices being safe at home. So that massive increase in sales, look, I'm not promising 200,000 students every month now on, certainly not this year, but we'll get there. But this big growth in sales for us is definitely continuing as as these device programs are rolling out through the States. Next slide. So where's FamilyZone now? So again, I feel like what we've been, we're an overnight success after about 7 years of effort. I feel like what we've been talking about, people are really now listening to. Again, what we're interested in is making sure that kids are safe everywhere, that we can support the duty of care needs of schools, and we can help parents, navigate the challenges of the digital age. Through coronavirus, we've demonstrated product market fit in the US. We've demonstrated that we have the ability to scale, and we're deploying into school districts with over 90,000 devices, in an evening. Like it's been a transformational time for our business. And as I said, we've demonstrated that we've got product market fit, and we've got channels that can scale, and a product that can scale incredibly well. Next slide. That's it for me. Please send through questions and we'll chat at the end of the session. Back to you, Ben.
Thanks very much for that update, Tim. Yeah, glad to see that, as you say, the message you've been putting out there for a long time is now gaining some really serious attention. So well done. And our last presenter today is Steve McGovern, MD of Dubber. So I'll hand over to you, Steve.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for your interest. What I'd like to do is just very quickly tell you a bit of background on Dubber for those of you who may be new to it, and also we're sort of at the centre of what's happening in terms of not so much COVID-19, the Band-Aid requirements, although that's important, but more around BCP, or business continuity planning, which is how industry and businesses are actually planning to move forward in a cloud environment, in a distributed workforce environment. And we'll take you through how the company is involved in some of that. Next slide, please. The background is that Dubber is the global cloud call recording and data capture platform, actually for service providers, for carriers, for telcos. So our customers are not the end users. The end users belong, if you like, to our partners. And we are a data capture layer that is built and embedded into a telco network. So when I talk to you about some of these providers that we work with in a few minutes, we're the only data recording platform in their network. The platform is scaled to be able to capture anyone and everyone on that network. It removes the need for scoping, productization at the customer's end, and basically anyone on a telco network can be switched on for our service at any time. And so what that leads to is it leads to a short-term and clear and present vision which we have today around call recording, and that is that call recording is something that you should be able to just switch on as a service, as you would do any other service from your telco, and have the service delivered immediately. And the bigger picture is that because we're actually capturing data or data across the entire network, we have a vision that every phone service in the future will actually have AI capability. Now, AI can be transcription, it can be the gateway for applications that drive businesses, but in the same way that you'd expect voicemail to be part of a service that you take today, we believe in the next couple of years you'll see that AI, the ability to use the data that comes from the conversations, will be a standard feature in every phone package. Some quick snapshot of the company. Our average revenue at the moment per user is $7 Australian per month. We have just under 200,000 users when we reported at the end of June, 16.1 million ARR, which was an uplift of about 3 mil from the preceding quarter, and we're fully funded with $18.5 million in the bank as at the 30th of June. So can we go to the next slide, please? What we've done since we inaugurated is we've become the platform of choice for global leaders. So I'm going to talk to you very briefly about unified communications and how I guess that's been at the center of the things that we're doing actually on this call, and also the transformation of industry during COVID and beyond. So we've been chosen by 138 providers. You can see some names up there: AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, all in the US, of course, Telstra, Optus, Vodafone. We are the embedded platform, the recording service, and the data capture platform for Cisco for their cloud telephony platform, which is the transformative technology for Cisco, called Cisco WebEx Calling. And our big picture is about interrogation and use of the data. And we have several partners in that field, one of which is IBM, where we're currently working with a couple of the banks here in Australia who want insights on the business and the phone calls and that are going across the whole of their business rather than just their contact center. If we can go to the next slide, please. Thanks. So obviously we all know now it's a once in a lifetime generational shift to working from home. the providers that we work with, the technology that we built fits seamlessly into something called unified communications. And unified communications, whether you're currently on a Telstra service or a Cisco service or using Zoom, it's all about cloud communications platforms. And that is really where Dubber has a unique technology and a unique design. And as you can see, you know, some of the major unified communications platforms in the world have adopted our technology. It's the only one of its kind that they can actually use in their network to capture any and all of their users without seamlessly. Next slide, please. And I'm going to use one of them, Cisco WebEx calling, as just a quick example of where the industry's at. We came out early and said that the business hadn't been affected by COVID. And from a commercial perspective, I think that's true. Obviously, I'm actually dialing in from Melbourne, so you're in my front room at the moment. And you know, the first thing we do is look after our people. I think that's the most important thing, because that's where the health of the business comes from, and also the productivity as well. At the same time, we were very fortunate because we'd just been embedded into Cisco WebEx calling and a number of other networks as well. So Cisco WebEx calling is Cisco's cloud version of telephony. Many of you will be familiar with, or maybe even use a Cisco handset, which might be connected to something called Call Manager, which is the on-premise Cisco phone system. There are 94 million users of those globally. And Cisco's mandate is to move as many of those as possible over the next 3 to 5 years into their cloud platform as a standard transformation. So we're actually the recording service that's been built into it. We're not one of, we are actually the recording service, part of the furniture. And whilst that provides an immediate solution for people, you can imagine when you've got banks wishing or having to work from home, and when you've got airlines having to work from home, they suddenly can't record calls, which might be a compliance requirement. And in certain cases where that happens, and they're Cisco users, then obviously, you know, we're an option for that, or we are the option in Cisco WebEx calling. So what we're actually seeing is not that we've had to make any changes to help our customers, more that our original strategy has been fast-tracked and probably opened up a different market than we were expecting at this time in our sort of growth. So ostensibly, small businesses with a need for call recording can switch it on immediately as part of their telco service. What COVID has brought is it's brought major companies who may have been looking to transform their own business over the next 2 or 3 years. It's brought all that forward into something that we call BCP, or business continuity planning. So the company finds itself in a situation where banks in Europe, for example, suddenly need to record their people from home. It's not a temporary measure. It's something that will happen. You know, they're building for the future because they see that their employees are going to be spending time either in the office or at home. And so they'll put an order in through Cisco. They need to record several thousand of the users because they're a bank, and we automatically get clicked on. If you go to the next page, please. We're actually built directly into Cisco's ordering system and also their provisioning system. So the end user would actually think we are a Cisco product. And it's been a major kickstart for us during COVID in terms of the pipeline we've been able to build out, which we haven't actually got in our current numbers. So we can see the pipeline. You can imagine that getting a bank in Italy connected is a 3-4 month experience, including security requirements, etc. And so we haven't seen the benefit of that in terms of our current numbers, but we can see the pipeline and the orders in the system that we'll get immediate and future benefit from. Next slide, please. Locally, let's bring it home. Last Wednesday, we went live on Telstra's mobile network. And so what this means is, and also their business networks, which we know as Tippit and SIP Connect, you would think it's Telstra's digital or voice IP platform. So if you're a Telstra business user, you can actually switch on Dubber, have your calls transcribed, record calls if you need it, and you'll be able to integrate what we do into your business applications to get insights. So where does this all leave us? So the company finds itself solving compliance requirements, short-term with long-term outlook to business continuity. And we're also using the AI aspect, because that's really, I guess, the bigger picture for Dubber. Not necessarily to monitor insights regarding customers. But for example, some of our carriers in the UK are providing bespoke telephony solutions for nurses for the National Health Service. And the interest there is not so much on how the customers, what the sentiment of the customers are, but really how the health workers are going in an environment they've never experienced before. So we're able to produce that data around sentiment analysis, keywords, etc., because the phone calls are captured and turned into data, and it's becoming a really useful tool in terms of monitoring the welfare of health workers, or you know, some of the large companies are looking to do this as well. Next slide, please. What COVID has done for us is it's given us a really near-term predictability about our business. The actual impact on our business has been quite binary. We have a number of carriers out of the 138 who are what we would call challengers, maybe not as big as Telstra or as big as AT&T. And as you've heard from some of the previous presenters, there have been challenges around maintaining and looking after an SME customer base. And so all the users that we put on in the last quarter, which is about 20% of our total base in the last quarter, are all in that small business, you know, band-aid requirement sphere. What we can predict going forward, because again of the deployment time, is the business continuity planning around things like Cisco, around Telstra, and some of the bigger companies now looking to put their BCP plans in place. So the company's in a healthy position where all its metrics are growing at a considerable rate. We'd expect that to continue and grow as part of this BCP program. Next slide, please. You can see users there, just a steady growth to 192,000. As I say, 40,000 came on in the last quarter. Next slide, please. Our ARR has also risen in line with that. So it's at the moment, most of our revenues are coming from that $7 per month call recording metric. So you can see $16.1 million as of June. And the final slide, please. And we're actually uniquely set up for global scale in our industry. We're quite different. We don't service enterprises. We don't build technology for enterprises. We build it for the carrier and have it served from the network. And what it means that a bank can actually capture the data across its entire employee base, as opposed to the 4,000 or 5,000 that are sitting in contact center. So we expand the use case even around call recording. So we have two growing markets, which are call recording and artificial intelligence. We're, if you like, with a utility for other AI companies to use voice data. We've got a long tail of future revenue. We're integrated at the network core, and our churn is negligible to non-existent, because even if an employee leaves a company, the recordings in that account are still maintained for the future. Significant operating leverage. We're a cloud business whereby you know, we have a very low cost in terms of maintaining users, additional users into a platform. We're a global sales channel. We have offices in Melbourne, Sydney, Dallas, Atlanta, and London. And we've got world-class partnerships in all those areas, including all 7 of the major US carriers. Excuse me, that's my phone going. And that's pretty much the double story. So I'd be happy to take some questions on it.
Thanks for that, Steve. That was really interesting. We'll open it up to the panel now, I think, Dave. We've got, I suppose, a comment followed by or a comment based on my experience, followed by a question that's come in. Tim, you mentioned stronger teams and more cohesion, and Steve, you mentioned looking after the health of your people. I suppose from an Automic perspective, all of those comments ring true and can relate to. We had the very good experience, I suppose, of going into an unknown situation of remote workforces, as I mentioned earlier, just shy of 100 staff, who work generally on a daily basis in a very collaborative basis, very collaborative manner in offices. So there was concerns, I suppose, around how that was going to work, productivity and customer service targets, which are things we monitor very closely. And yeah, I mean, that was obviously a big concern initially, but I suppose pleasantly, those things were all maintained, and in some cases actually improved. So that was I suppose a good experience, and also shows the caliber of the people within our business. So I suppose the question to you all is along the lines of, I suppose, what surprised you most about having to work remotely and also potentially manage remotely working teams?
Oh, look, I'll kick off. I'm not sure about surprise. I mean, our business is from the ground up global. We've got offices everywhere, and the tools that people have found useful in remote learning, remote working are endemic in our product and in the way that we operate. So it was like duck to water that for our business. I'm sure most of the panelists on this call would be the same with their teams. The other thing that I noted was in terms of the fear, the anxiety of all the employers. I felt the best thing that senior people in our business could do was be transparent, and that was really well received by staff. So if I didn't know an answer, I was very explicit about that. If there was risks for pay and jobs, we were open and transparent about that. Fortunately, we didn't lay off anybody. We didn't cut wages. In fact, we're growing the team by a couple of people a week. So, people stuck with us, and I think the way that our business certainly handled that was well received. I'm open to others to make their comments.
I think, if I may, to back against what Tim was saying, we've actually put more people on through the last couple of months. What I would say, as somebody sitting in Melbourne, is that the impact may be yet to come. We need to be careful of this as employers and as leaders. So I can tell you that whilst there was a real bonding together, I think every company found new ways of engaging with its staff in quite unusual ways and quite fun ways. And I think we were all, Googlifying, if you like, our business in terms of bringing a fun element and elements into the business that maybe we hadn't brought to bind our staff together. In Melbourne, the second wave and the lockdown into stage 4 has definitely brought a new dynamic to our staff here in Melbourne. There are more people now wanting to go to the office, and it's really about just breaking the routine. So for those of you who are not in that situation, if it does come your way, there's a slight cautionary tale there. My major concerns actually during the period have been in our London and Dallas offices, where particularly in Dallas and Atlanta, they've had other issues as well around the Black Lives Matter riots and things like that. So, but I think, from our people's perspective, it's been a very galvanizing period. But if there is a second wave, the wheels haven't fallen off at all. In fact, if anything, we're even more galvanized, but it becomes a different challenge because you can't repeat what you did 4 months ago. It's just a slightly different challenge. So you need to be a bit more flexible.
I'd just add a small thing from my perspective, all the little things that, whether you have almond milk in the fridge and what type of beer you have in the fridge on Friday afternoon drinks all goes away. And I'm very, very impressed and pleased with the collective group coming together to make sure that everyone was, taken care of, and just the collegial nature of the team, just, making sure that people are okay. I think I was blown away. I think if you have a good culture in your organizations, when people in the really, really heat of the moment or the distressing circumstances that you might be in, to see people come together and show the true culture of your business come to life, I was really impressed and very, very proud of that. So, I mean, that talks to making sure you've got a good culture in your organization as well.
I can add something there as well, Ben. There are a number of things that you need to consider in terms of that culture, and that's the culture works well when you have an existing team and you take them offline. There's a question at the moment is what does it look like after COVID-19, and the issue is that to bring on new staff, it's very difficult to do that from remote working hubs. The culture hasn't been embedded in those new staff, and they don't know the team and they don't know what else is going on and how people sort of interact and the personalities that are around. So there will be a swing back to office environments, I think, but we will then have a counter swing as we start to move remotely and get over that hurdle of how do you imbue culture into your new staff if they're working remotely or they have a work from home period to their daily routine.
Yeah, it's very true.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much for your time today, gentlemen, and your presentations. There's no more sort of group questions to address at this point in time. So unless anyone has anything else to add, we might wrap it up there.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.